everyone, and welcome to episode number 41 of the Tom, Stu and You podcast. Stu, how are you doing?
Mate, wonderful. Welcome. How's things?
Yeah, all good with me, man. Thank you. How's things in Canada with lockdown and things like that? I hear things are pretty hectic.
Yeah, well, we are going into lockdown number 1.5/2, depending on how you interpret the rules and how you interpret the other lockdowns that aren't really lockdowns that we've been having. So, yeah, things are a bit all over the place right now. Like, we're basically in total lockdown, except for some reason retail stores can still stay open at 25% capacity. So, oh no, 15% capacity.
Yeah.
So
15%
people
capacity.
can still go shopping in the mall, but you can't hang out with any friends inside or outside. So Christmas is cancelled this year. So
Christmas is cancelled this year.
Woo! Yay, 2020.
No, I was going to ask you about Christmas because actually, there's a lot of rules knocking about coronavirus, and I think we've just come out of a second lockdown, but I can't be sure. Again, retail places are okay to be open at the minute, but you can only go to the pub if you're having a meal. So you can only have a beer if you're having a meal in a pub.
Oh yeah.
I think that's cool. What else is a rule? So no one really knows what the rules are anymore. But Christmas isn't cancelled in the UK because I think it's the case that for 5 days over the Christmas period, you are allowed to have a bubble with 3 other households. I think that's what's happening. So in a way, that's kind of nice because I am looking forward to seeing family and stuff after all this time. Well, that's a shame that it won't be the same in Canada.
Mate, that sounds like the 10-second rule for germs. Like, it sounds good. It sounds good in theory, but I don't think that's quite how it works. Yeah. Coronavirus doesn't give Christmas a break, and 5 days isn't a quarantine period. So, what?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think that maybe the government felt pressure to get things sorted by Christmas, and obviously there is news of vaccines and things like that, which is a good thing, which is great. But yeah, so I think they kind of had to do this politically, maybe, to satisfy people, because cancelling Christmas in the UK wouldn't have gone down well.
No, well, it hasn't gone down well in Alberta, and that's for sure. So we're in lockdown now for 4 weeks. So Christmas is definitely cancelled. Mid-January we'll be looking to revise the rules again, because Alberta is, I think, on a per capita basis, Alberta is the third worst. If it was a country, the third worst in the world at the moment for coronavirus cases.
Oh, really?
That bad, eh? Yeah, Alberta is leading the charts. Oh yeah, we are breaking records.
Well, I kind of I'm a bit surprised by that, actually, because Alberta is quite a big province, and it's quite sparsely populated. Apart from Calgary and Edmonton and stuff like that, which I suppose has got a lot of people.
Yeah, Calgary and Edmonton are definitely. I mean, not that Banff is doing much better, to be honest. But no, there was the whole anti-mask rallies. Thousands of people turned up to a couple of weeks ago. A few even travelled all the way to Canmore to continue protesting. We are very much anti-mask, anti-vaccine in Alberta here right now. So, yeah.
Wow. Scary times.
I've just been staying home, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've seen that a lot of people are like, "Oh, this vaccine sounds rushed through" and things like that, and it's like, no, it's met all the necessary conditions. It's just because of COVID, everything's been sped up. Like the processes have been sped up. It's been had all the money thrown at it, so it's gone through all the necessary procedures that it needs to go through. It's just happened in a much quicker time frame, which is fine.
Yes, lockdown round 2 is going to be quite interesting. That's for sure. I think. I know a lot of people struggled in the first lockdown, particularly back in March and April. But what I did like about that period was that there was a sense that we were all in it together. Celebrities were hosting free events, and movies were being shown online for free, and every gym had online workout courses and stuff. And I especially find it very hard looking back at Australia, particularly to see that Australia is literally living life like normal right now. Everything's back the way it was. They had a rugby match not a couple of weeks ago, 56,000 spectators in the stands.
Really?
Yep. So to think like that's what life is back to at home, and we're in our extended lockdown in Alberta here. Yeah, it's quite a difference of opinion, difference of experience, that's for sure. So I think mentally this one's going to be a lot more of a challenge with people just being over it. So
Yeah.
in that spirit of trying to keep things alive and happy and healthy with us all.
Mhm.
Obviously keeping in touch with close friends and doing things like this podcast. And today's episode is going to be a bit more of a lighter one because let's have a bit of fun with it. Yeah.
Yeah, we thought, we'd leave capitalism criticisms at bay a little bit in this one.
That's nice.
As it's coming up to Christmas, we might be a little bit more lighthearted, I guess. So,
so we just say
say
fuck capitalism now and get it over and done with.
Fuck it. Yeah. Yeah, there it is. Although that might pop up a bit later, just casually. But so I was listening to the radio the other day whilst making food, and thinking, just subconsciously about what to do for what would make, a good podcast episode that was a bit more lighthearted.
Love your
and then yeah, exactly. And I was switching through radio stations, and then Radio 4 came on.
Classic.
And Desert Island Discs popped up, and I was like, oh, Desert Island Discs might be or a Desert Island Disc type thing might be good. So for those of you who don't know, Desert Island Discs is a BBC Radio 4 show. It's a British institution that has been going since probably around the time of the Second World War or something like that, I think it's 1940s or early 1940s or something. And what happens is that it starts with some lovely tranquil music and the sounds of waves, the ebb and flow of waves.
Are you going to sing for us, Tom?
Crashing on the beach. I'm not. No, and I am going to caveat that at the start. I'm saying everything that I talk about now, there's going to be no singing involved whatsoever. So anyway, they invite a cast. Yeah, they invite a castaway on, which is some sort of celebrity or person of renown, and those people are tasked to pick 8 songs about their that are important to them or remind them of certain times in their life, or just songs that they like. They are to pick a book as well that they would take with them, and a luxury item to accompany them to the desert island. So I figured we'd do something like that and maybe throw in a couple of our, other extra questions that we feel like answering maybe. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, this is it's a fairly improvised episode for me. You've kept some of these questions close to the chest. The only one you've really told me about is inviting famous people to dinner, which obviously is a question I've thought about before. So I'm excited to see these other questions you've got. And all right, music. So, was music a big part? Is music a big part of your life to start with?
Yeah, I think that it is. I do have certain songs that remind me of people or certain times in life. I think it's important to me, just generally, because I have it on all the time. Like, in the shower, doing work, I'm always listening to the music. And the genres that I listen to are like really wide as well. I don't, when people say, what's your taste in music? Things like that, it's super, super wide. I like a bit of everything, really, which is great. So yeah, I think it's important. Like, what about you?
I mean, I have music going pretty much all day, every day. I like working to music. I listen to music when I work out. I listen to music when I run. I used to fall asleep to music back in high school and university. I'm not sure how that was healthy, but now I listen to rain sounds and rainforest sounds as I fall asleep, so that's surely much healthier. But honestly, Spotify was possibly the greatest invention that's ever come along in my lifetime, because were you that kid? So when iTunes first came out, here we go. Back in my day, when iTunes first came out, were you the kid that had the playlist organized? You would download album artwork on Google and upload. Were you that organized music kid when you were growing up?
No, mate. Back in my day, right, I used to tape songs off the radio with a cassette.
Yeah, okay.
So that's how old I am. And you used to have to kind of try click it before the adverts came on or whatever. And if you didn't get it, you were like,
adverts in there.
Shit. Well, not shit, because you didn't know what that was. But yeah, you were annoyed that the adverts got into it. So that was me. But no, I've never been super prepared with play. I'm not like Warby. Warby's the one with the playlists and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure he's got, playlists that you can follow on Spotify.
Oh, absolutely.
and
I mean,
all
yeah, I mean, like,
that kind of stuff.
there was only 2 radio channels that we had access to growing up as a kid, like, and they were both AM radio channels, so most of it was static. If you got I just remember going to boarding school and getting FM channels for the very first time. That like blew my mind to just how much better FM channels were, and CFM or something where they just play like the hottest 100, all the pop songs. Like that was what my later childhood, I guess, was built on. So I was never the organized kid at all. I remember at boarding school I had it was like a CD player and radio built into an alarm clock, and I thought I was the coolest kid going. Less,
sure. You probably were.
No, less cool because of my choice in CDs wasn't exactly like that great. It was mainly like for the Aussie kids out there, So Fresh. Man, loved it. Like just the top 10 songs of every season. Came out 4 times a year.
Oh yeah, we have now.
Yeah, you have now.
Here, like that. Now,
that's right. And then I think there was maybe like Westlife for some reason in it. I feel like Casey Chambers I had a few of her CDs, so for some reason I know all the words to like barricades and brick walls. Like that song. Hilary Duff for some reason, I know, man. I didn't choose the CDs, but they were the songs on some of these CDs. So yeah, I know like every single word to the songs of my teenage years, and then I don't know any lyrics to any songs since about 2010.
Interesting. So do you think Spotify has revolutionized the way you listen to music?
Yeah, having someone else curate playlists that I can just enjoy, perfect. Spotify Radio, literally the best thing ever invented. Yeah.
No, I do like that for discovering, because you go onto these playlists and you just discover new artists as well, which is great. And I feel like that's hard to do, without that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, Spotify is good. Spotify is good. I always have it on. Although I don't have the paid version.
What?
I have I have the version where adverts pop up every, I don't know what.
I would give up Netflix. If I had to choose between Netflix and Spotify, I would give up Netflix, I think.
Yeah.
Spotify Premium to me is that is,
It's life.
It's live. Spotify recap is quite funny every year. For some reason, it's always like the most random songs that come up as your most played throughout the year.
Yeah. So ones that you don't think that have been like super important, but clearly have subconsciously.
No, like Odessa, one of their songs was my top played song of 2020. Of 2020. I don't remember the last time I listened to that song. I have a feeling maybe I had like clicked it at one point and fallen asleep, and it was just on loop with like my speaker turned all the way down. Sure, that's the only explanation because I don't listen to that song very much.
Oh, that doesn't.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I did. Like maybe lockdown number 1, I've just blanked all those memories, and I was actually listening to all these great pop songs. Yeah.
Yeah. So what about your taste in music then? Is it wide? Is it varied? Is it?
Oh yeah. My liked songs on Spotify is all over the shop, and I go through moods too, where like you can almost tell my mood at the time that I added all these songs to my playlist as you scroll down through it. So you're like, oh, he was into like basically country music this week, and then he was into like old school INXS Australian music for some reason, and then you keep on going. There's like Hilltop Hoods down the bottom there, and then there's a whole bunch of pop songs in the middle, and obviously I'd listen to the radio at one point because then there's some of the top, CFM songs.
Yeah.
All over the shop.
That's great. So kind of the same as me then. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any songs that stick out to you that are important to you or remind you of people or anything like that?
That's
a tough question.
that is a very tough question. The only big song I think that stands out really to me right now is reminding me of people and experiences is actually the Jasper video song that we played on repeat when myself, Erica, and Wabi went to Jasper last year.
The Waters by Fionn Regan.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Every time I hear that song, I just get so happy because it's such a good memory. But other than that, I don't really have other songs that like stand out as being that important to me.
Okay.
Behind Blue Eyes, actually, is that a Linkin Park song? Is that who it is? It's coming back. Behind Blue Eyes, that was the song of my high school because I have blue eyes. So like obviously being a sad teenager, I just thought like, oh my god, this guy is he's just written a song about me, as I sing about love and heartache at 15 when I've never even spoken to a girl before. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah. So yeah, as we said before, there's going to be no singing in this episode whatsoever, but we might link in the description to, other songs on YouTube. If you watch on YouTube, then you can, maybe see what we're talking about if you so wish. So a song that I'm going to pick first that reminds me of my childhood and my mum mainly, because she always she always used to make me, not make me, because I probably was just singing it all the time anyway. But she still says that I should sing it now, but I just don't. Is "I Can Go the Distance" by Michael Bolton, which is from the Hercules film, if anyone's watched that one. And she talked about like when we used to be in the car as a family, and I would be in the back of the car singing it at the top of my lungs, and she tells me about that all the time, and so that song reminds me of her, and it's a good tune as well. It's a really good tune.
Can you just give us a couple of lyrics to get?
No, I can't. I can go the distance. There you go.
Right.
It's great, and if you've seen, the cartoon Hercules film, which is
a brilliant movie, by the way.
It was great. I loved it. It's on there, and it's just great, and it reminds me of her. And another one that reminds me of my mum actually is "Home" by Chris Daughtry, or Daughtry, the band, which is a really good song. It's the song that she listened to when she went to Africa, and she was away from us for a little while. Volunteering and helping out and stuff like that, and it was important to her there listening to it, and it's just and that's a great song. So that reminds me of her as well. "You'll Never Walk Alone" is another song that I'm going to pick. Jerry and the Pacemakers did a version of that. It's basically Liverpool's anthem. When the players come out and stuff like that, and obviously that reminds me of my dad, of my brother, and going to Anfield, which I haven't done for a long time because tickets are just ridiculously expensive. And my dad always preferred to watch the matches on telly because he's in the warm, he's got a beer, he's got instant replay, which you don't get in the stadium and things.
That sounds way better.
He's like, this is great. And I was like, but the atmosphere at Anfield is amazing. It is amazing. And yeah, it's just a great tune, and I always have a little sing of it when the match is starting, and it reminds me of the time that we were in the Kop End and you pass the flag over your head and stuff like that, and there's like an energy, a charge in the atmosphere, and everyone in that stand and most of the stadium is fully behind the team. It is almost like a religion in a way. Because you're all believing in the same thing. And nowadays, my mum goes, "That's just capitalist, that," because she knows that I go on about it so much, and she knows how much football players get paid, and I'm like, yeah, I know it is, and I know that it's so divorced from what it was as like the working man's game when it initially football initially started out, but
because it's past logic and reason, it's become emotion.
It's because it's
straight up faith.
I had no choice. Basically, I was indoctrinated from an early age because, I got given a Liverpool kit when I didn't even know what it was, so I didn't have a choice. But it's fine.
So it sounds like a religion, yeah.
It does sound like a religion, doesn't it? But yeah,
Malcolm Gladwell also does an unreal podcast episode on that song.
On "You'll Never Walk Alone."
Yeah,
amazing.
Revisionist History is his podcast. It was, I think I've listened to 4 full seasons of it on the last couple of days of my road trip.
Yeah,
and that podcast in itself is like one of my top recommendations for anyone, anytime wanting to learn things about and just recognizing that things aren't always the way they seem. And I just love Malcolm Gladwell so well in general anyway. But yeah, he does a podcast on that song and like the history of it and where it's come from and sort of like the impact that one song has had on people.
That's interesting.
So I highly recommend that one for you.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great song as well. It's full of like togetherness and being part of a team and all that kind of stuff. And there's hope and light and all that sort of stuff.
What we need right now.
Which you do need sometimes to be a Liverpool supporter, because I've just waited 30 years for them to win the league.
Yep.
So yeah, that's another one. I'd also pick "Hey You" by Pink Floyd is a song I'd pick. That's got some great lyrics in it. It reminds me of being in Canada, actually, at the Indigenous Solutions to Environmental Problems conference that I've talked about before on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of, lyrics that I take to mean, forms of solidarity, like, united we stand, divided we fall, and all that kind of stuff. Roger Waters was on Video Link during that conference and spoke about solidarity with the Ecuadorian people who've been, poisoned by Chevron and stuff like that, and with Stephen Donziger, who we've talked about on the podcast, who is the lawyer representing the Ecuadorian people and who has been, victimized by Chevron and demonized by them and things like that. So that's another one that reminds me of being in that room and, feeling like I was in a place full of like-minded people, who were concerned about the environment, concerned about justice, concerned about, standing up for what's right, basically. So that's an important one. And then I've got two more to pick. So I picked a poem for one of them, actually. So a little bit different, to a song, but we'll allow it.
Yeah.
I think we'll allow it. So the poem is Half Caste by John Agard. It's an amazing poem. People should listen to it. It's just so great. It's clearly about race and things like that. So and it's just amazing. And he says things like, explain what you mean by the term half caste. Do you mean that when Tchaikovsky mixes a black key and a white key is a half caste symphony and stuff like that? It's so good. And I remember studying it at school. It was part of an anthology book that we had to study for GCSE English literature. And it's literally one of the only poems I can remember from it, because it just was so powerful to me, I guess. And yeah, so people should check that poem out. And the way that he performs it is so great. Like, the way he delivers it is amazing. And then lastly, I just picked something a bit more current, I suppose. So I picked Wicked Games by The Weeknd, which is a bit of a brutal song. But it's the first song that I heard of his. My sister actually introduced me to his music many years ago now, probably like 10 years ago or something, I reckon. And that's the first song that I listened to. And since then, I've seen him twice live. And Tyler and I were supposed to go again this year, but it obviously got cancelled till next year. So that's something that Ty and I do. Go see him whenever he's in the UK. And he's one of those artists where he is like actually an artist. He's not some manufactured, X Factor and all that kind of crap that there is. Like, he's actually, gone through the artist grind kind of thing, and he actually sounds like how he sounds live, or even better, maybe. Like, so those are the 8 I'd pick. And if I was to save one of those songs, as they ask you to in Desert Island Discs, I don't know what I'd save, because I would also have the Fionn Regan one that you said, because that's my 8th one, because it reminds me of the trip that we had in Jasper and stuff like that, which was amazing.
Also, it's just like when you find the perfect song during the experience.
It is.
It
is great.
Like we were listening to that song also while living the experience. So like that doesn't happen. Like when you find the perfect road trip song while on a road trip, or a holiday song when you're on a holiday. Yeah.
Oh, and then my other song is Nella Fantasia by Jan Werner. So it's the tune to it is Gabriel's Oboe, which was my little nana's favourite song. And it reminds me of her, and she was like the kindest person that I knew, really. And the Jan Werner guy who performs it is just got an incredible voice, like, so good. So people should check out his music as well. But if I had to save one, I'd probably save I Can Go the Distance, I guess.
Of course. Liverpool through and through.
Oh yeah, no, that's the other song. That's the You'll Never Walk Alone one. It's tough. I think I'd do I Can Go the Distance. But yeah. So have you got any important songs?
Your final answer, sir.
Yeah. I think
Lock it in. Lock it in.
tough.
Yeah.
Well, it's also hard to pick music. Like I could pick so many songs, so to limit it to 8 was quite.
Yeah, and I think even just hearing you speak about things and like as you bring up things, obviously my mind's like whirring away in the background too, just being like, oh, and then like this comes up and then this comes up, and I'm thinking like Jamie XX, which like an ex-girlfriend introduced me to, and I like love his music, and then I think about all the times I listen to like Hilltop Hoods and just like every now and again, like one of their songs will just like hit me closer than I realized it probably at the time.
Yeah.
And then I think like I'm just like scrolling back through my Spotify real quick now, and I'm thinking back to like Sail by AWOL Nation just being like the pump up song that I used to listen to with my roommate before every single exam. We'd listen to that one as we were like walking out the door towards the exam hall.
Yeah.
And then, thinking way back to like Kryptonite by Three Doors Down and just being like a kid, and that was just like such a big song at the time. So yeah, it's weird when you like the very first song I liked on Spotify was Hazy by Glass Animals, and it's a song I like never listen to anymore. But I guess at the time that was like the song that caught my attention when I first got Spotify.
Yeah, definitely. And isn't it amazing how, music does transport you or remind you of certain things and makes you feel like certain ways and things like that. I think it is great, and it is an important part of life for sure.
And if you're going to cheat with a poem, I've got that instantly brought back like one poem that I haven't thought about literally in probably like a decade. And that was If by Rudyard Kipling. And as you were talking, like my mind just like transported straight back to boarding school. That poem was on a poster like right outside we didn't have doors at that time. Outside the entrance hall to my shared room. That was like on a poster, and I probably read that poem like hundreds of times over the 5 years that I lived there. I even chose it to analyze in an English class once. And usually when you analyze something in English class in high school, it ruins it for you forever. But this was like the one thing that stuck with me. And I think actually I might save this poem and try to like find the poster again, or something, just because that was such an important part of growing up. And it like reading back through right now, I'm just like, damn, like that was good. Like I should be reading that and thinking about that more often.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking with the half-cast John Agard poem, because it's so good. It really is good. So moving on next to the next thing that we've got to talk about as part of the Desert Island Discs, I think, is a book, right? So you get given the complete works of Shakespeare to take with you, and you also get given the Bible. Have you read any? Have you read the Bible or?
So this is interesting because you had mentioned briefly that we had to think about a book, and after like going back through all the fiction series and non-fiction series that I've read in my time, I was like, what actually would be an interesting book to take with me is the Bible, because as the most influential book ever, most copies sold, I've never sat down and read the Bible through and through. I've obviously read different passages and stuff, in my very brief religious upbringing. But I thought it'd be like the one, because I was thinking like it'd be interesting to bring some of Plato's works or Aristotle's work, or something thought provoking that I could think and mull on if I was stuck on an island by myself all the time. And I was like, oh, maybe the Bible is like the one thing that I'd bring with me. But now that I get to bring it anyway.
Yeah, you get it. So pick another one.
Like Shakespeare's like, nah, what, cool, but
it's What have you got a favourite Shakespeare?
Nah. See, like
Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth.
Romeo and Juliet. I mean, Macbeth was good, except we had to analyze that for English class, and as I said, that just like ruins every story for you. Once you start like being told the way you should be perceiving something based on the opinion of one particular teacher at the time, I feel like that, like when you get told your perception is different to theirs and therefore yours is wrong, for some reason, I think that always ruined English class for me as a kid. When they're like, oh, the author,
your perception, right?
Yeah, and the author wrote Blue Curtain because they were feeling melancholic at the time and they wanted to set. And I'm like, well, no, they might have just liked blue as a color. Like, just so many things about English class I think were taught poorly at school that it just ruined so many stories for me. And
Yeah.
Macbeth was one of them. But it is a nice play
Okay, so what
piece of writing.
What book would you take? Because you've got the Bible, you can have that for free. So
Yeah. I was trying to think for this question, like what is my favorite book I think I've ever read? Like what has had the most impact on me, I think. And I've read a lot. Like I'm a serial reader, I guess.
Yep.
I don't like to read things twice because I don't like to know where the story is going to go.
Yeah.
The only two books really that I guess I've read multiple times on purpose. One is The Magician by Raymond E. Feist,
Okay.
which was like the fantasy book that like brought fantasy into out of the darkness and into just modern day society.
Okay.
The whole Riftfall saga is incredible. I've read all of the books now, and The Magician is like the one that also it's a nice big thick book, so it'd keep you busy for a couple of days. And the other one was The Power of One.
Okay.
Which I read myself on purpose as a teenager, and then we also had to analyze it for English class as well, and it didn't ruin it for me even then.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of life lessons, I guess, you could get from that book, and it also makes you appreciate the upbringing you have compared to the upbringing of other people throughout history.
Yeah, definitely. That's good, man. That's good. I picked Sapiens.
Damn, yeah, that's a good one. See, that's like, yeah, there's so many books I'd like to bring.
Because Sapiens to me is one that I just kind of couldn't put it down. I remember like just reading it and really enjoying it, and the way that Yuval Harari thinks, I was like, whoa, like this is good. Like I did find that quite eye-opening, I suppose. Maybe other people don't, but it's just how I perceived it. I was like, whoa, this is all actually just the story and that kind of thing, and all the fictions and all that kind of stuff. So I think that would be interesting to have on a desert island. But I also thought as well, if I had like the complete works of Shakespeare and the Bible, that maybe I would just take like a photography book, like the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, or Humans of New York, or some sort of Nat Geo nature book, just to look through, sort of thing. Kind of like an art thing, really, I guess. So that would be nice to take as well. So I didn't know whether to go for something that's like something like Sapiens, or something that was maybe something more creative.
Yeah, a bit more lighthearted.
So a little bit more lighthearted and things like that. Although I guess if you're on a desert island, there's a lot to look at there.
Yeah, the all boys boarding school part of me wants to say like the funny answer, like Playboy magazine or something, constructive as it were. And if I wanted to sort of like interpret the rules slightly differently too, I'd probably say that if I could only take one book with me, it would be like a blank workbook or like journal or something. So nice. Not to read something, but to write in something.
Make something, yeah.
Especially if you've got the Bible and Shakespeare to think about, I think you'd have a lot of thoughts you'd want to write down and sort of like consider. And I think just
and a lot of time
on my hands, and just knowing the importance of journaling in my life already as someone who doesn't have a whole bunch of spare time right now. I just imagine if I only had spare time, I would have even more thoughts to think about, and you'd go stir crazy if you couldn't write some of them down and try to think through them.
Man, I think that's a great answer. I don't know if anyone on Desert Island Discs has ever said a journal.
And if I wasn't sitting down, I'd take a bow.
I'll have to look into that and see if that's a good answer. What would you say? Because I suppose they may have put this in the next category, which is what luxury item would you take?
Yeah, I mean, that if I couldn't take it under the book category, then I'd definitely take it under the luxury category. I also thought maybe something like a camera would be a good idea. Like if you just ignore the logistics of actually having some piece of electronics, and then not having a laptop to edit the photos or like take them off or whatever, but like a camera or something. Something along those lines, I think, would be.
So a lot of your things would be about recording your experience while you're there.
Yeah, I'd say so. Even if no one sees it, I think it's still healthy to record your experience as you go, and that's not just me trying to embrace the influencer lifestyle of the millennial generation. I think just for your own sanity, I think just to have a record of the experiences you go through, so that you have something to compare back to see progress, or
Yep.
if things are going badly or poorly in your life, at least you can look back to happier times.
For your own creativity as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just to give you something to do.
Yeah, some archaeologists could dig that up in like hundreds or thousands of years and see what you were up to. So yeah, that could be important. I put hammock because I just think hammocks are great on a beach, and I think they're one of the comfiest forms of, I don't want to call it furniture, but I don't know what else to call it. And it reminds me of freedom as well, because I remember being on a hammock in Thailand, with a Chang beer, and I was like, I actually don't have any worries at all.
I could do with that right now. That sounds like the dream.
I was like, I remember a hammock equals freedom. I also, when we had the hammock in the back garden in Canada, I remember chilling in that and being like, this is decent.
Yeah, it is. I mean, my only pushback against that is I feel like I could make a hammock.
Oh yeah,
I have made a hammock before. As a little kid, me and my brothers made a hammock at the bus stop at our front gate, which was a kilometre away from the house. Had a baling twine as kids, because we grew up on a farm, and what else do farm kids have to do when you're waiting for the school bus every day? So we tied together a whole bunch of baling twine and looped it between two trees so that we had somewhere to sit. I mean, it wasn't greatly appreciated by our more risk-adverse parents, but we had fun doing it.
And did it work? Did it support like your weight?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the comfiest thing because there were knots, obviously.
For sure.
Because baling twine, for everyone who didn't grow up on a farm, is only half a meter long. So to make it into a hammock, you have to tie quite a lot of knots into quite a lot of rope to get it to support the weight of even relatively skinny children.
Yeah, you need a lot of cordage.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yeah.
So you fancy that you'd be pretty handy at creating like your own, lean-to or like den or hammock?
Oh yeah, I've made a lean-to before. Like I've made a little lean-to and den before, as well as kids. The hammock as well. I mean, if I was really thinking about the book to bring, I'd probably bring like some sort of survival book.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm pretty okay with I know the concept of making snares, even though I've never like specifically made one before. I think I'd be okay with catching animals and building shelter and roughly getting water and whatever. But there's always more to learn.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think you're good at taking like that kind of theory and putting it into practice with like kind of bushcraft and stuff like that?
I think so. I think I would be. Yeah.
Yeah, see, because I fancy myself as being able to do it, but really, in reality, I don't know if I would be able to do it. Making fire is important, and I don't know that I'd be able to do that without a lighter. So if I was thinking more practically, maybe I would bring like some way to make fire as a luxury.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do the whole, where you rub your hands together, and I don't know if I can do the friction fire starting one. And flint, I've never used flint. I understand the basics of how to use it, but if you don't bring the flint with you, then you have to there's so many things that if you could only bring one thing. Yeah.
I don't know, man. Yeah, but I would bring a hammock for sure.
Yeah.
And it's great. So this is where we kind of deviate from the classical desert island discs, because we're going to go off on a little tangent into our own little, as Christmas is coming up, little dinner party.
Okay.
And we're going to say who, 4 or 5 people or however many people you want, really. Just to keep it intimate, not too many people, not like a house party. But who would you invite to a dinner party from any time in history? I think this is a tough question, actually, because there's so many people, right?
Yeah, I mean, my top 3 came to me pretty much straight away. But then after the top 3, there's 100 people that could possibly fill the next 2 positions, depending on the mood I'm in and what I hope to learn. So my top 3 is Leonardo da Vinci, Theodore Roosevelt, so Teddy Roosevelt, and Alexander the Great.
Okay, so why did you pick them 3? Why did those 3 come immediately to mind?
Oh man, I have a whole page and a half of notes here.
Go for it.
So,
take it away.
to start with, obviously a bit of a history buff just in general. Like I've always loved history, and obviously these three people in particular have had such an um, such a huge impact, I guess, on human history. Leonardo da Vinci, as we all know, is the Italian polymath who is widely considered one of the most diversely talented individuals ever to have lived. Painter, scientist, inventor, interested in astronomy, anatomy, inventing siegecraft, an unbelievably talented painter and sculptor. Um, in general, I love the Renaissance period, probably from growing up playing too many Assassin's Creed games, to be honest. Um,
Yeah.
but I think just to be able to have the chance at sitting down with Leonardo da Vinci to talk about, his unquenchable curiosity and, as someone said, his feverishly inventive imagination. He was so far ahead of his time, which is even more fascinating when you consider how religious and how people still believed in four humors being what affected your health. And here, Leonardo, purely because he was such a talented painter, being given access to cut open bodies to study the anatomy of people and just push science so much further than we could ever know. I think it'd be a fascinating discussion to try to understand the mindset of the man that we now consider the prime example of the Renaissance man or ultimate or universal genius. He's called. Um, He'd be the ultimate podcast guest, that's for sure.
It would be a good podcast guest.
But yeah, I'd love to know what drove his curiosity, how he stayed motivated, and how he stayed so productive, even though he was bad at finishing things. He obviously could start so many things. I couldn't imagine just being inside his mind because he could flicker between so many different topics so
exactly.
quickly, and just he had for his time, such a deep understanding of so many various subjects of academia. But I also would love to know like what it was that he feared. What love felt like for him. Did he realize the impact that he would have on the world and have on history at the time? He was obviously celebrated. Kings and important people like the Medici family obviously went out of their way to make him feel supported, for life.
Yeah.
They obviously celebrated his genius and made sure that everyone knew about him. But did he suffer from the same sort of celebrity status that our celebrities do today, where, he looks good on the outside, but deep down he has the same sort of fears that any of the rest of us have? I'd also like to talk to him a lot about where he thought the importance of his apprenticeship and mentorship was. I feel like that is definitely a practice that we have forgotten to some extent within modern day society, where you surround yourself with individuals who encourage you and support you to explore various different topics and bring it all together in one sort of like project, as it was. So even though he was a painter and a sculptor, he had to study anatomy so that he could be better at, realistic representations. And so this lady, Liana Bortolin, writing in 1967, said, "Because of the multiplicity of interests that spurred him to pursue every field of knowledge, Leonardo can be considered quite rightly to have been the universal genius par excellence, and with all the disquieting overtones inherent in that term, man is as uncomfortable today faced with a genius as he was in the 16th century. 5 centuries have passed, yet we still view Leonardo with awe." And that's from the life and times of Leonardo. I just feel like no one else in history has lived quite the same way that he has.
That's a good point, man. Definitely, especially in terms of how many subjects, as you say, that he looked into. It really is quite something, and as you say, that's not really something that happens too much these days, really.
No, we specialize so very quickly, and I mean, maybe for some people it's quite obvious. I do not like to specialize. I like being a generalist, and it goes against every piece of advice that anyone successful gives these days. But I like exploring different things. Like I like, touching on photography and videography and, digital art and illustration. But then I also like to write and journal, and I like to be good at different sports, and I like different new activities. And I also was quite good at business, and I did accounting, but now I'm not. I'm now doing digital marketing, which is completely different. So but then I also like science, which is why
It's
I'm so
nice
heavily
to,
involved in science. So he's like
yeah,
he's the
I guess.
he's the ultimate representation of who I wished I could become. Um,
Hmm.
but I feel like no matter, I feel like there's definitely a certain level of genetics, personality, um, luck
Luck.
as well that isn't quite realistic anymore. I guess maybe.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. I do think there are, there's a lot that you can do yourself to do what you want to do or look into what you want to do and things like that. But I don't think it can be denied that there are like external things that you can't control, uh, which is something that I've always thought really. Sometimes people will be like, "You're too much external locus of
Yeah,
control"
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever. It's like, no, it's no. It's just like it's quite obvious that there are things that I can't control that do
yeah.
have an effect on what I can do and things like that. You know, having enough money or having the economic freedom to do whatever you want is one for sure. So who did you say next?
So next was Theodore Roosevelt, so Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah.
Interesting.
Um,
Why did you go for Teddy? Old Teddy.
I went for Teddy. So particularly in university, I guess I discovered a blog called Art of Manliness. I think at the time, especially having just graduated from an all boys boarding school, I was quite obsessed with the whole concept of masculinity and how it's portrayed in everyday society. And obviously, this
Mm-hmm.
blog was um, an exploration of what it means to be a modern man while also still embracing the traditional role of masculinity in society. So, Theodore
Okay.
Roosevelt featured quite heavily on this blog, which is now turned into a podcast and books and YouTube channel. It's blown up quite a lot. But similar again to Da Vinci, Theodore Roosevelt, he was a politician, a conservationist, a naturalist, a historian, and a writer. So again, just
Mm.
someone who has a brilliant understanding of very differing subjects. And I like seeing
Mm-hmm.
people achieve in a generalist term as opposed to being specifically amazing at one thing. I
Mm-hmm.
also find that it's quite interesting that he was a Republican, but it was the leader of the progressive movement of the early 1900s. So, as much as we
Mm.
talk shit about the Republicans a lot in US politics right now, they
Mm-hmm.
weren't always that same way, and it's just interesting to see how history changes throughout the years.
Didn't didn't he do quite a bit for national parks and stuff like that? Because
Yep.
he was quite the outdoorsman and
So
things
he
like that, wasn't
established the
he?
U.S. Forest Service. He also established 5 of the first national parks in the states, and the area of the United States that he placed under public protection totals approximately 230 million acres. So
Mm.
930,000 square kilometers, which Trump is trying his very best to get rid of, despite the fact that he is lost. But um, yeah, so Teddy Roosevelt generally ranked as one of the 5 best U.S. presidents as well. Yeah, so what people liked about him and what I liked about him is his versatility, his respect for law, and his sincerity is why he's voted so highly. But what this Art of Manliness blog I think talked a lot about was that he prioritized his health. He exercised regularly with boxing, tennis, hiking, rowing, polo, and horseback riding. He also had a warrior
Mm.
persona, placing warlike qualities high in his scale of values. They're things like organization, self-control, self-discipline, the
Mm.
pursuit of outdoors, respect for nature. But then
Yeah.
also standing his ground, having confidence in his abilities. Um, not always to his benefit. Perhaps sometimes he made decisions that were a bit more aggressive than he should have been. But no one's perfect. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but this is written on his Wikipedia, and I think it's such a good summary. Is that he believed that 19th century entrepreneurs had risked their fortunes on innovations and new businesses, and that these capitalists had been rightly rewarded. By contrast, he believed that
Mm.
20th century capitalists risked little but nonetheless reaped huge, and given the lack of risk, unjust economic rewards. Without a redistribution of wealth away from the upper class, Roosevelt feared that the country would turn to radicals or fall to revolution, and his Square Deal domestic program had 3 main goals: conservation of natural resources, control of corporations, and consumer protection. So
Interesting.
obviously,
So capitalism has read it.
yeah, pretty much. And it's interesting to think that this is like 1905. And he was faced with the same sort of situation that we are now faced with again in 2020. Um, historians credit Roosevelt for changing the nation's political system by permanently placing the presidency at center stage, and making character as important as the issues. And that obviously has turned out poorly for us in the previous 4 years. But his accomplishments, he built trust, conservation. He brought that to the foreground. He was a hero to liberals and progressives, people say, for his proposals in 1907 to 1912 that presaged the modern welfare state of the New Deal era, including direct federal taxation, labor reforms, and more direct democracy, while conservationists admire Roosevelt for putting the environment and selflessness towards future generations on the national agenda, and conservatives and nationalists respect his commitment to law and order, civic duty, and military values, as well as his personality of individual self-responsibility and hardiness. So it just sounds like that's the sort of leader we need to bring back again. He's the epitome of the perfect man, as it were. Like strict self-discipline, incredible control, and just a constant focus on development and personal growth. His secret ability was that he was just a normal guy. He wasn't particularly talented at any one thing, except for the fact that he could energize himself to ruthlessly pursue the different qualities that he had. So he was just go. Yeah. His schedule started at 9 a.m. where he had a strict schedule of walking with his wife through the gardens. But then he would still be entertaining guests at midnight, 1 a.m. He kept journals and notebooks. It's just that organization, self-discipline, and control, I think, is what I aspire to be, and the fact that he is the most well-read of any U.S. president in history. A voracious reader. And
did he have shortcomings on his attitudes towards race?
Oh, absolutely.
Which, for the time, I'm sure he did.
But this is the thing about mentors in general. I guess these are all mentors as well that I look up to. Is that you don't have to aspire to be them exactly, and you shouldn't aspire to be another person exactly. You can cherry pick the personality traits, the qualities, and the values of people you respect throughout history. And I think that's the reason why I choose people who aren't alive anymore. In particular, is that they can't then disappoint you after the fact. So you go into this mentor-mentee relationship knowing who they are as a full, complete person and the impact they've had on the people around them and on history. And then you can cherry pick their best qualities and ignore the ones that you don't agree with.
Definitely. That's a good point.
Which, leads well into the next one, Alexander the Great. Obviously not someone I would aspire to be in general. He was aggressive. He didn't love to take orders from, especially his father. But he was... I guess for people who don't know, he was the king of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedon when he was only 20, after his father, Philip II, was assassinated. And by 30, he had created one of the largest empires of the ancient world, stretching from Greece to northern India. He was undefeated in battle and is widely considered one of history's most successful military commanders. He led from the front, inspiring great feats of courage in his men. And I like that concept of leading from the front rather than, the typical aristocracy of the period was you lead from the back, sitting on a horse and let other people die for you rather than risk it yourself. Also,
well, that's what happens these days.
Yeah, exactly. Also, the fact that he was tutored by Aristotle until he was 16 years old. I mean, come on, that is possibly the best sort of upbringing any one person could possibly hope for. One of the greatest philosophers of history of all time. But his shortfallings was that he was arrogant and had an unbelievable amount of self-confidence, believing himself to be the true son of Zeus, which is similar to the story of Achilles, if anyone knows anything about ancient Trojan history. Alexander himself was actually inspired by Homer's Iliad, and Napoleon was likewise inspired by Alexander the Great. It's the main reason why Napoleon went to war so often is purely because Alexander the Great had. But what I liked is that Alexander, he taught himself through observation, very much like Leonardo da Vinci did. And unlike other military commanders, he decided not to wipe out the cultures he colonized, but try to integrate them as well. So he encouraged cross-cultural marriages, he encouraged trade and set up trade routes, and that's probably one of the greatest and longest-standing impacts he had on the world and on history. And he had a great desire for knowledge, a love of philosophy, and was an avid reader as well. So very similar
Yeah.
to both Da Vinci and Teddy Roosevelt. So
Yeah.
a lot of my pick
Yeah.
is all about trying to, or getting given the chance to understand the mindset of these incredible historical figures.
That's a good list. That's a good list. And your point about picking people who are no longer with us is a good one, actually, because some of mine, actually, most of mine are. But I don't think they're going to let me down.
No, I don't think they will either. But when they're alive, I think I think it's easier to forget when someone's alive that they are still human, and you idolize them before they've been given a chance to become realistic, I guess.
Yeah. So mine, I think, quite obviously top of the list. Can you guess? I want to see if you can guess.
Yuval Noah Harari. Oh no! Oh no! Hang on. Oh, it's almost Chomsky Day.
Chomsky Day. Yeah. So Chomsky's top of the list.
Chomsky, of course.
Who I just think is, perhaps the greatest intellectual of our time, still alive, father of modern day linguistics, but has then spread out into, looking at everything from politics to, the way that society is set up. It's just amazing at seeing the bigger picture, can quote, almost any material, like any question you pose it appears that he's prepared for it. And it's just, how do you get that depth of knowledge and retain it? It's just amazing. He was outspoken critic of the Vietnam War and things like that. So it'd be interesting. I believe he got arrested for some of the civil disobedience that he was involved in. Is an advocate of civil disobedience, peaceful civil disobedience, and makes the quite accurate point that all the rights that we enjoy today have come about from civil disobedience. They're not just handed down benevolently. They are won by the people, basically. He's been alive for a long time, but he was alive when Hitler was in power. So he's seen many, many different manifestations of government and ideology, from fascism to neoliberal capitalism. Yeah, it's amazing what he's lived through, and just to find out a bit more about how he thinks, how he goes about going through like referential material and references and picking them apart, and then keeping that knowledge and then connecting the dots to like big picture thinking. So a lot of mine is to do with big picture thinking, and again, not just specializing in one, not just specializing in just linguistics. It's about looking out and things like that. So the second one is Yuval Noah Harari, again, because like Sapiens for me was such a great book, so interesting. The ability to see the big picture, his ability to see the big picture is amazing. And if no one's read Sapiens, I always recommend it to people. His other books are also fantastic about the future and the present day. I'd also be really keen to hear his experience of coming out as a gay man in Israel and things like that. I'm sure there's a story there. He talks about not really knowing how he felt himself, and algorithms and things like that would have been able to tell him when he was 16 and whatever. So finding more out about those aspects of his life would be super interesting, and how he thinks the future is going to look like. Also, his views on Vipassana meditation, because he's a big advocate of Vipassana meditation and attributes being able to write Sapiens to that practice. How he goes about that practice, because I've tried meditation, I really have, and I do think it would be beneficial, but I suck at it. Like, I'm so bad at it. I remember sometimes I've tried and I'm like, right, sit down, start thinking. I get frustrated that I think about things, is one thing, when really you should just go, oh, I'm thinking about this, and then just move on.
You should. I think you would benefit a lot from Sam Harris's Waking Up app.
Yeah.
Because he talks a lot about that as well.
Yeah. So there is that. So there's that kind of experience that I have with trying to do meditation. And then another experience I have is just waking up on the floor 2 hours later because I've fallen asleep, which has happened like a couple of times now. So, the retreat, because he goes to retreats, like silent retreats, I think, and stuff like that. So that would be really interesting to find out. And just, where he thinks his work's going to go in the future. David Attenborough is the next one that I had. Just because he's David Attenborough and, all the stuff he's seen. We recently did, an episode on his witness statement and talked about what a life he's had, the adventures he's been on. How he thinks things have changed over time, I think he'd be an amazing guest to have. My next one is Angela Davis, because I think she'd be really good. So, her experience of the civil rights movement, feminism, like the way that she sees it, because, I've been super interested to, learn more about feminism, from the guests that we've had on, things like that, Kaylee and Sarah. And because I always have in my mind the question, like, is a woman getting to the top of, some sort of capitalist, extractive, exploitative corporation, in a system designed by a man, is that good? Is that a victory for feminism? Because I don't know. Like, some people would say it is, but and would say it isn't. But I don't know that it is. And then Angela Davis talks about not the feminism of Hillary Clinton or anything like that. The feminism from below is what she talks about, and this is more the kind of thing that I'm thinking about, because I think that she talks about the interconnectedness of social justice battles, which is what I've alluded to. Like, can we join like people, going for women's rights and gay rights and environmental rights and things like that, and all join it together? That's the interconnectedness of these social justice battles. And she says, you can't look at feminism without looking at race and without looking at class. And I agree with that completely. That's what I think. I think that. So I'd be keen to get her opinion on whether she thinks that it is a success, because I'm not so sure that she would think that. And to hear about, her involvement in, the Black Panthers, the Communist Party, all that kind of stuff. The work that she's done on the prison industrial complex in the US. We talked about, in the Defund the Police episode and all that kind of stuff. I think she would be a super, super interesting person to speak to. And then for my last guest at the dinner table, I had this person or maybe this person, and these people are dead. So I had Karl Marx or Adam Smith, because
or both.
I thought, do I go with a guy who? Yeah, but if I've only got who do I not invite and let these in? I don't know.
Invite them both, because I'd like to be there. I want to hear them having a discussion.
Yeah, well, Karl Marx borrows a lot from Adam Smith, because Adam Smith was around before Karl Marx was about. And I wonder if you invited Karl Marx to a dinner party, he'd just be like, "I told you so." Like,
yeah,
I told you.
Sit back with a piece of garlic bread.
But interestingly, with Adam Smith, because people, there's think tanks called like the Adam Smith Institute, and they're like the free market capitalist neoliberal kind of people, and they obviously hold him up to be like the father of modern day capitalism. But he talks about the concept of the invisible hand in The Wealth of Nations, and that's technically, I think, and the reading that I've done with Chomsky, is technically an argument against like neoliberal globalization, because he argues that if say the people of Britain are in competition with things manufactured abroad, the people will buy British as if guided by an invisible hand. But really, that's not transpired. People are buying like the cheap stuff from China or whatever, and things like that. And you see things like jobs, being cut in the UK where they have higher wages and things like that and exported abroad. Similarly, the founder of INEOS, this Jim Ratcliffe or whatever he's called, he was a Brexiteer, an ardent Brexiteer, and he said that he's going to make a new type of Land Rover Defender. He's going to like revamp that series of cars, and they're all going to be made in Wales, was his promise, and things like that. he's now moved to Monaco, and he's confirmed that it's going to be made in France.
Mhm.
It's like it's just crazy. So I'd like to. So I might invite Adam Smith actually and go, is this what you envisaged? You know, what do you think of this modern day capitalism? Like, because I actually think he was for the working man. You know, he was for what benefited the working man, whereas it's been taken to the extreme, and people only read the bits that they want to read of Adam Smith, and then go, no, this is what he's, because he does talk about, isn't it great that, you know, the baker pursues baking for profit, and, you know, each has got their own thing. He also says that just being specified in one thing leads, you know, a human to be the most dumb that they can be. That's what he says. So I think he would be an interesting guy to have at the table, and to see what he thinks about modern day capitalism and how it works. So those are the people that I'd invite. And then moving on from that, we talked about mentors.
Mhm.
I think, you said that they were the people that we'd invite around the table, sort of thing. So
Pretty
Chomsky,
much, yeah.
Harari, Angela Davis. I'd also throw in there Richard Wolff. Like his economic update that he does on YouTube is well worth a watch. You know, critic of capitalism, of course. But it's really good stuff, and so I'd encourage people to do that. And so another question that we had, Stu,
all right, here we go.
What do you say to humanity about a curious alien who's visited planet Earth? You know, what do you say to him about the human condition and humanity as a whole today? You know, in the present day.
That's a good question.
What would the curious alien see? What would he observe if he come down?
I mean, he wouldn't understand, because I don't understand, and I am a human with all of the context and understanding of where we've come from. Yeah, I definitely find it's a curious case of the human condition, in that we say we value certain things, and yet our behaviors don't mimic what we say and what we think we value. And this is in every part of our life, really. We've talked, I think, on a previous episode about how poor humans are at choosing loved ones, for example, and why algorithms do a better job, which I believe was a Match.com survey, or Match.com research, I think, back in the day, where people said that these were the things they were looking for, and then they ended up choosing and dating and marrying someone who didn't match their list of requirements as it was. We say we value the environment, and we value products made at home, but then external factors like the importance of money and a lower price outweighs the things that we say we value. We say we prioritize family time, and yet we consistently and constantly decide to spend more and more time at work away from loved ones and family.
Or plugged into devices.
Or plugged into devices, exactly. So I don't know what I would say. I would say we're a confusing breed, that's for sure. I definitely do not understand people. I don't understand humanity or society. I don't understand why more people don't understand me, but then obviously I don't understand them, so why would they understand me? Yeah, it's a fun paradox we find ourselves in.
It is, isn't it? It's interesting because, we have, somehow evolved to become the most intelligent species on the planet. And so I think I personally think that kind of position that we find ourselves in means that we have a huge responsibility to be stewards and custodians of the planet, rather than, just exploiting it and being extractive all the time. And for fictions, we talked about the work of Yuval Noah Harari. I think an alien would come down and be like, so you destroy the planet that you need for the foundation of your life for something called money that doesn't really exist in objective reality, which is a story it's more pervasive than any religion. It's the greatest story ever told, money, because obviously people from different religions still believe in the concept of money and things like that. But it is just a story, as is quite, it's greatly illustrated in Sapiens, and it's just kind of insane, really, isn't it, when you think about it, that we are behaving in such a way that we destroy the foundations of life. It's everything that we love, all the great things that we do create, like love, art, music that we spoke about. And we are destroying the foundation, and we know we are, and we still do it anyway because the economy has to keep going. The economy's got to keep going.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing on the news that you ever hear about is the economy, even though it's a man-made fiction that doesn't exist. But the environment and climate change, climate breakdown does exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the alien would see that we're facing, like, 2 or 3 just off the top of my head, like existential crisis, really, like climate breakdown, nuclear proliferation as another, especially when you have someone like Trump or something in the White House, and pandemics as well,
Yep.
So that these pandemics come from our relationship with nature and animals. Yet we just continue, and we like, everyone's talking about the vaccine now. It's like, oh, we got this vaccine, we can continue as normal. This whole thing should be a wake-up call to go, we clearly can't continue as normal, and we need to change our relationship fundamentally with nature and the way that we eat and the way that we treat other sentient beings on this planet. I think it would. So Einstein, when the atomic bomb was dropped and stuff like that, or the atomic bomb was created by Oppenheimer and stuff like that. Einstein called for world government, which is something that I kind of do think is needed. But again, we have these stories, nations and flags and stuff like that don't exist in objective reality. But I do feel like the alien would be like, so you've got these existential things that you need to deal with, but they require cooperation on a global scale. And you're bickering about economies and stupid stuff that doesn't exist. It's mental.
It's invisible borders. Yeah.
Invisible borders, yeah.
The other thing that's always just like, I mean, not always, I guess it's been somewhat of a relatively recent realization in the last few years, is that the only way that humans have gotten to this place is through, to become the most intelligent and widespread species on the planet, is through cooperation and our ability to think long term. So, we are able to forego short term desires. So, back in the hunter gatherer days, when we had, first had the industrial revolution or agricultural revolution, for example, we could think long term enough that if we kept some of this food and didn't eat it now, when things didn't go our way, we would have food to eat. And that is how we went from being hunter-gatherer to now being set up as the most prolific species in the planet, right? But that cooperation and long-term thinking, for some reason, we kept expanding on it, and evolution happened, and we got bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden it just stopped at our borders, where we can only cooperate with our neighbors or our nation, for example, but we can't conceive of a world government, and we can't think longer than a couple of years to say that, like, hey, this is a climate emergency. Why are we not preparing for that? So where in history did it go from cooperation and long-term thinking to then that breaking apart and us not continuing on with that? Because
we can only cooperate if it's if it doesn't breach our sovereignty, which is a main principle, or it's financially beneficial for both of us. When we need to be doing things that are beneficial for everyone. And again, you can't get to that, sorry to say, but with capitalism or anything like that. Maybe with like a more planned economy and things like that you could have in socialism, you would be able to. But yeah, these are things that we need to do. And it's whether you want a dystopian future like the Matrix, or whether you want a sort of Star Trek future, where we come together as a planet and explore the universe. We explore inner and outer space together forever, which sounds great to me. That's a quote from like Bill Hicks, who's a stand-up comedian from the late 80s, 90s. He would also probably be a great dinner guest.
He would actually.
He's got a good point. He's got a good point about that. So, the next question: if you could go back to a time in history, any time, when would you go back to and why?
I hate these questions. um, I I want to preface this answer with: do we
Hmm.
go back to live in this time period, or is it just like a virtual game where I get to just like fly over and just explore without actually influencing anything?
Good.
You know, because I would love to go back to pretty much any of the ancient civilizations. I would love to explore what ancient Greece and Rome and Egypt, what
Yeah.
ancient China was like, Genghis Khan, like.
Yeah.
But I don't actually want to be alive in that period, unless I was for some reason Julius Caesar. I mean, he got stabbed in the back. Bad example. Unless I was rich, um, but if I could just explore to see what that time period was like, oh,
Mm.
I'd love to go back to. I mean, that's still no exact period, though, is it? That's
Mm.
only tens of thousands of years.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'd love to explore from a distance ancient
From this.
civilizations and Renaissance. If I had to live, however,
Hmm.
I think I'd actually prefer to go forward in time.
Oh, that's a curveball. That's interesting.
Yeah, I do love a
So,
good curveball.
so you would like to see whether the predictions in David Attenborough's witness statement come true, or whether we have a dystopian future, or a good Star Trek future.
Yeah, I just I can see that technology has improved our lives so very much,
Hmm.
and I would like to explore just how far that possibility takes us by going forward a few hundred years. Um, the optimist in me would like to think it's a nice, peaceful, um,
Yeah.
incredible experience for all.
Hmm.
Um,
A utopia almost.
I mean, I would hope that we reach that point. Knowing human nature, it's unlikely we ever truly reach a an accurate representation of what utopia is. I feel like even if we start exploring space, it'll still be us versus them because that's human nature, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
Even if humans cooperate on a global scale, once we discover another race, it's
Mm.
unlikely we're going to cooperate with them on a galaxy level. There's always going to be another level to explore.
Yeah,
But I'd like to think I'm optimistic in how the future turns out. Um,
that's good.
Going back, there's too much of a risk that you'd be born into poverty, and that just isn't a great living for anyone. You
Yeah,
know,
there is that. So that's a good point about living there or just being an observer there. I
because I don't
think.
want to be a slave.
I think I'd just be an observer. I think I'd go for
Yeah.
If I can go back and observe, I would either go back to like the 1950s, 60s, because I think it's a time of quite a lot of civil disobedience. So like it might be nice to go back and try and learn from
Hmm.
what people did, what was successful in civil rights movement, stuff like that, women's rights movement,
Yeah.
all that kind of good stuff. Um, so either that or the late Cretaceous period. That's why the dino nerd in me. Because when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I wanted to be a paleontologist. I remember that vividly. I can't remember what guy I wanted to be. I think it was called Bob something, and he was a paleontologist who used to do all these dino shows. And the late Cretaceous has my favorite dinosaurs. So T Rex and
Yeah.
Triceratops and all that sort of stuff. But again, that's just something where I just want to pop my head in and see them and be like, I wouldn't want to live there because
Yeah.
there's
No. No.
probably huge bugs and things like that could kill you.
You'd be dead
Uh,
instantly.
yeah, so
I just can't.
if it's like a little, you're just like there in a holographic form and you can
Yeah.
just observing things, or if it's like Narnia and you can just poke your head through the door and just go back in, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think I might go for the late Cretaceous because I'd just love to see a dinosaur
Yeah. That'd be pretty sweet.
like Jurassic Park. That'd be pretty cool.
And also just to know how different they actually are from how we imagine them
Yeah,
to look.
did we get it right?
Nah, we definitely didn't.
Like it? Did they have feathers?
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. I think it would be great. I'd love to know that. Big dino nerd.
Big dino. Big dino. No. Yeah.
Okay, so now we come on to what you think of like religion or the idea of God. Yeah, we're hitting all the big ones today.
Yep.
Okay, so what do you think about that kind of thing, or just think about you believe in like a higher purpose? Because we haven't really touched on religion in any of our podcasts yet, so I feel like we could like touch on it here because it's important to some people,
Mm.
and I've I do see the I do see the social utility in it in
Yeah.
certain in certain aspects of you can get a great sense of community. It's nice to sing songs together and all that kind of stuff. It's nice to feel like you have a purpose, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
If you think that purpose is to there's a man in the sky looking at everything you do, and if you're good then you'll go to heaven, or if you're bad you'll go to hell, which I think is pretty weird. But if that makes you feel good or gives you some sort of safety or feeling of security, then that's great. But I think that you're here for a finite amount of time, so this is all the time that you get, so that you should try and live to the fullest. Try and learn as much as you can. Try to be the best that you can. And that in itself is quite precious, that it's so short, And I suppose I'm like, I say spiritual in a sense, but not in the sense of believing in anything. So when I see a mountain, or when we saw the grizzly bear, there's like you feel like that's something special,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something great to witness and things like that. But I don't personally believe in a higher being or anything like that. I think religion's fine. I think it's fine as long as it doesn't get in the way of politics, which it does too much, or how society works. Sometimes church and politicians who believe in who deny climate change and things like that, that's dangerous. When that kind of things happen. So when religious beliefs start to impose on people or become too extreme, then I sort of have a problem with it. And if you start killing people or victimizing people because of what you believe in as a religion, that's just ridiculous, out of order.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with social utility. You can't deny the impact that the church has had on humanity and human history throughout the millennia, I guess it's been. It's obviously the church, and by the church I mean in any of the religions. It has not been a great example of a societal structure. They have done some conceivably terrible things throughout history. I think the danger of religion lies with dogma, and that's when a dogma is a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority as what's that word?
Sacrosanct, incontrovertible.
Incontrovertible, true. So you can't question their authority, and you can't question the truth of the matter. You just have to accept it.
Great.
Yeah. So yeah, undeniable faith as it was. Like I think faith is dangerous on its own, but the social utility of religion, I think, is possibly worthwhile. I think religion has definitely moved past its social utility now. I think it is more dangerous than it is helpful in modern day society. Obviously, if you go way back in time when humans didn't understand the way the world worked, it was good to have belief in a higher power to explain away the unexplainable. And
the bad harvest.
The bad harvest and stuff. Like it was nice to think that if you just behaved better, you would be treated better. And there is some value in, regardless of what you believe in, if you act as a better human, that's obviously a positive for the world. It's just that, I think faith has definitely moved beyond helpful now, in that people use it to explain away shitty behavior, and they use dogma. They use a dogma of religion to fight back, push back against what is now becoming, scientific evidence, as it was.
I think I'm always surprised by how much money they seem to need as well.
Yeah, that's it. The fact they never pay taxes and all of that. It's like they've definitely become a social. Yeah.
They've got all the money in the world, even though I said that quote on another podcast. I think it's harder for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. So why are all these religions super, like all these buildings are ornate, and all the look where the Pope lives. He's got his own country.
Yeah, exactly.
It just seems excessive, if anything. But I don't know. It's my mum has always said, you don't have to be religious to be kind.
Yeah.
And she didn't. I kind of find it personally weird. I guess because I grew up this way, but when people grow up different ways. But when people get christened just as a matter of course, like that. Yeah. Yeah, my mum didn't do that to me, because she was like, you should choose for yourself what you wanted. I mean, I got indoctrinated into supporting Liverpool. So that's kind of similar.
Yeah. She's not perfect. That's all right.
But I didn't have a choice in that. Yeah, that was my dad. So so really, that was his fault. But she was like, always, you should choose yourself, and you don't have to be involved in religion to be kind or anything like that. And that's just the thing that I take forward, I guess.
Yeah.
That's touching on religion. In 1977, right, NASA sent a collection of music, sounds, and images from Earth into outer space. What cultural artifacts would you choose in 2020? If there was like to communicate with life out there, sort of thing. What would you send?
Man,
mine's very. I don't know. Do you know what I said?
Go.
A bit facetious, really, but I said a phone with TikTok loaded onto it. Because that is the state of humanity in 2020
it is.
For me.
It kind of is. Yeah, I mean, I was watching a video this morning of a TikTok influencer. She's a geneticist trying to explain what's in the vaccine, just to sort of reassure people and fight some of the misconceptions about the vaccine. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to put down the new thing that the kids are doing. So TikTok, for example, everyone's saying, "Oh, fuck off TikTok," like it's just that next thing. But that just makes it sound like the grumpy older generation. Like you have to embrace the fact that change is coming. We don't always get to choose a way that represents itself or presents itself. I mean, Personally, I'm not on TikTok though. I just don't feel the need to be on another thing. But I also don't hate people who are on TikTok. I can judge them for it, but I judge people for a lot of things. So, it's the same with Instagram influencers. Like I may hate them and judge them for it, but I can see the utility they bring to society. Social utility once again, right?
Maybe that's where people get their information
from. And people like influencers, I think, like that's been a thing for all of human history. It's just the people that are in that category now have changed to being people who focus much more on image, for example, and sell themselves out maybe a little bit easier than some people in the past, but it's just a little bit more accessible, I guess, to be an influencer these days than it used to be. But you can't fight against it. That's the way society is developing. It's the only way. But in terms of to answer your question though, I'm not really sure. I think maybe what represents the state of humanity today.
It's a toughie, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I've always loved the image of the pale blue dot. So that the first image of Earth from outer space, I think, is pretty special.
Well, they see it on the way in.
Yeah, but we're sending it out into space, though, so you got to assume they're not here yet. Yeah, we're not giving it to an alien dude. A green guy in a UFO. I think it sounds weird, but like those state of YouTube replays that they do every year.
Okay.
I like the concept of that, and I think there was, didn't they do something in the middle of the pandemic this year? There was a documentarian that is putting together a documentary of one specific day of 2020.
Oh, yeah. So a day in the
life of 2020 of thousands and thousands of people around the world. Good. I think something like that just shows like how everyday mundane things that actually mean something so much to each of us individually.
Okay, that's a great
You know,
answer. Yeah, we'll send that out.
we'll send that out. In terms of like songs and stuff, I
And in
don't think any
fact,
songs in particular represent us better than anything
yeah,
else.
yeah. True. And then finally, the final question I've got is, what would you say to your 16-year-old younger self?
Jeez.
What advice?
Um, what would I say to 16-year-old me?
Hmm.
I mean, it's tough because I didn't like to listen to people's opinions when I was 16.
To authority, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I think I'd
yeah.
like to think that I was self-aware enough to listen to a future me, though, giving advice. Um,
Yeah.
I think a lot of my advice would probably come down to um, ways of building self-confidence, having
Mm-hmm.
faith in trusting the process. Um, things like don't listen to the people who are telling you what to study at university
Mm-hmm.
um, just because I was so unsure. I think at the time I sort of put more value on the words of others than taking the time to
Yeah.
really
No,
sit down and understand.
agree with that.
Um,
I agree with that. Yeah.
maybe just reassuring myself that even at 27, like I am now, and I still don't have life figured out, I've got life much more
Mhm.
figured out than I guess I was scared of at 16. Um,
Yeah.
and just, I was very risk adverse as a kid.
Mm.
Um, I think just letting myself know that sometimes it's okay to take a few more risks and that what's the worst that could possibly happen.
Yeah.
We grow, I grew up in, I have to recognize the privilege of the position I grew up in. Not that I grew up in a very privileged position, but, there was always the safety net of a loving family if I absolutely needed to. And, you grow up in a well-developed country like Australia. The worst case scenario is not necessarily as bad as I probably feared it could be at 16.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then just to tell myself to take more advantage of all the spare time I had at university that I feel like I just wasted. Actually, I probably wouldn't have gone to
That's
university, to be honest.
interesting. So that was a big one for me. A lot of what you said chimes with me as well. If I could go back even younger, I would say learn a musical instrument because you were great at it later on. I know you could. I know people say you can learn it whenever or whatever, but it's hard. It's
Yeah.
harder to do it, and it's something you've really got to work at. And I have dabbled and stuff, but it's like if I was younger and just made to do
Mm-hmm.
it, I wish I was kind of made to do it in a way, even though at the time I would have
That's
hated
the
it.
thing. I think anything you were
But
made to do as a kid, you don't
yeah,
appreciate it at the
that's it.
time, right?
That's it. That's it. And like just get involved more, like I just say at university with like groups and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. I think that's something that I would try and do a bit more of. Um, so yeah, I reckon that's it. Um, that is it. Has my camera
Yeah, your
gone off?
camera's just gone off, so good, good timing.
Let's have a
Um,
look.
yeah, it's tough, right? Because
Hang on,
oh, there we go.
I'm back. But
He's back.
I've got to balance this again now. Okay, that'll do. Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's definitely tough. I mean, you're full of. I mean, I was full of so much self doubt at 16,
yeah,
and I feel like that has had such a profound impact on the way I live my life. That
mm-hmm.
over the last 5 years in particular, I guess it's been a huge uphill struggle of trying to figure out what it is that's important to me, trying to figure out who it is I actually do want to become and who I am as a person, as opposed to who I was and letting that impact my day to day life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but then it also in saying that, like, when I was reading up on some of these people, my dinner guests,
Yeah,
I remember that I had published a few of my journal entries from way back in the day, from like 2013 to 2015 that I wrote
yeah,
back at the time, and it's funny just to see like I can see I can see inklings of myself questioning certain aspects of who I was and what I wanted from life.
yeah,
And it's funny that something I wrote in May 2015. I wrote a journal article called "It Was Glory." Now it's where I talk about in the ancient world, glory on the battlefield was a key to being seen as having lived a successful life. Like Achilles and Hector, Alexander the Great, Spartacus, Hercules, Julius Caesar, and the 300 Spartans. Their stories echoing through eternity, inspiring countless retellings. But in today's society, what can we say the best among us strive for? Money, fame? And I start questioning like what it is we're looking for and what someone would have to do in today's society to reach the same level of renown, I guess, as some of the ancient figures, and if it's even possible. And that's coming from someone who in 2015 wanted to be the CEO of an international multinational company. Purely, I think, as a response to the fact that I wasn't the popular kid, I wasn't the confident kid in high school, and I wanted to become the CEO of this huge, big company to prove the success and prove that I was worth it to other people. And, the last 5 years, moving away from that external locus of success to, realizing that success comes from within. I think the final paragraph that I talk about in this journal entry was, who was to say that the heroes of old were the only ones worth remembering? People do amazing things every single day. The human experience is furthered by people from all aspects of life, some working alone while others work in teams. And in my personal opinion, whilst I love to read about the heroes of the past, the incredible stories of heroism and courage in the face of fear, which have echoed through eternity, I like to think that perhaps our own legacies can instead be more humbly remembered through those lives we have changed while living our own. Sure, there will be some who stand out amongst us, and it's a noble quest if done for honourable reasons, but if we were all to stand out from one another, then would anyone really be unique? The most important idea we should all be considering is, how best can we live our lives to the benefit of others around us? Let the fame follow the virtue. What will your lasting legacy be? How will you be remembered throughout the halls of time?
That's good, man. That's such a nice place to kind of leave the podcast almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, have a think about that question. What will your lasting legacy be?
Yeah.
Also, 2015-year-old me, bloody spot on with his journaling. I need to get back to that person.
Jesus, man. You should have kept it up.
Yeah, I mean, I have, reading back through, I have at times, also, I called it Behind the Curious Mind. Such a knobhead. But yeah, I have, there are some journal entries from 2018, 2019, just every now and again I write a bit more. So it's definitely something I'm looking to pick up, one of my resolutions for 2021, which I guess we'll probably talk more about in probably our last podcast episode for 2020, I guess, in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah. Nice.
Just so everyone knows, I guess we'll probably move to publishing episodes now once every 2 weeks or so, just because we've got lots on in life, and we want to take more time to think and prepare, I think, for every episode rather than having to rush through some.
Yeah, definitely. But I think going back to what you wrote in that journal entry there at the end there, I think that is kind of what you are doing with the podcast and stuff as well. That chimes with why we set up the podcast and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's great. And
if only I'd realised in 2015.
Yeah, I know. You could have been doing this for years.
I know, mate. I'd probably be famous right now. I would be that glorious person that I...
Half a million followers by now.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant.
So that's
the
awesome.
advice I give to my 16-year-old self. Start the podcast early.
Yeah, start the podcast early. Yeah. I'd go with that as well. And I think that what you said there is a nice place to end the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
People think about that. People think about what is important, I guess.
Yep.
In life and what kind of impact you want to have. We hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a little bit more lighthearted, a little more off the cuff. Hopefully get to know us a little bit more and how we think.
Mm-hmm.
Get in touch with us by email, hi@TomStewandYou. Follow us on social medias at TomStewandYou. Like and subscribe on YouTube, and check us out on Spotify as well. And until next time.
Yeah, if we don't see you before Christmas, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, everyone.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah. Good luck with lockdown or second lockdown or third lockdown, or if you're in Australia.
Whatever it is. Good luck figuring out the rules. Good luck figuring out the rules.
Yeah, exactly.
And, everyone look after yourself and have a nice Christmas. And until next time.
Bye.
Bye.